This episode's made possible by Planful.
Hi, this is David Bedell, the CFO of Lendio, and this is the CFO Thought Leader Podcast.
This is episode 937.
And I found myself, having a view, guiding them through the story, asking the questions, and people were listening. They were paying attention. And it was a remarkable 3 days. It really taught me, well, first of all, that is what drove me to get even more excited about biotech. And two, it really taught me that leadership doesn't mean you have to have all the answers. You have to know how to ask the right questions. You have to listen actively and really drive to decisions and have conviction in those decisions.
Hi, it's Jack. On today's show, we speak to Neha Krishnamohan, CFO of Kinnate Biopharma. Roughly 20 years ago, Neha Krishnamohan arrived as a college freshman on Duke University's campus, intent on pursuing a career that would someday grant her the agency to develop a product or therapy capable of solving a healthcare problem. Having grown up among family members with different careers in the medical field, Krishnamohan had inherited a deep interest in medicine. However, she felt that her tendency to want to be more hands-on made engineering a more suitable field of study. Meanwhile, as her college years unfolded, she was introduced to the world of investment banking, and she became intrigued by how the financial merits of a company inform its decision-making, positioning finance professionals to be at the center of critical decisions. You'll hear that story and much more on today's episode. We'll begin after this.
Hi, I'm Rowan Tonkin, Chief Marketing Officer at Planful, and we're a proud sponsor of CFO Thought Leader. At Planful, we're empowering teams just like yours to drive peak financial performance in every corner of your business. What sets Planful apart? We have purpose-built applications for every department, from FP&A to accounting, marketing to HR, all with built-in financial intelligence. This means we can get you up and running within weeks, and it requires minimal IT involvement. So you can rapidly and seamlessly engage everyone across the business in your key financial processes. Best of all, you can't outgrow us. We take the pain of growing away with an unmatched ability to scale with you. You have an endless runway with Planful. See why over 1,300 customers around the world choose Planful as their flexible, user-friendly, end-to-end financial performance management platform. Go to planful.com and see how you can make financial performance a team sport in your business.
So, hello, we're speaking with Neha Krishnamohan, CFO of Kinnate Biopharma. Neha, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, Neha, as always, we're going to begin by asking you to look back for us. Share some of the experiences that you feel prepared you for a finance leadership role. What comes to mind?
Yeah, I think when you ask that question, I kind of go all the way back to, frankly, high school. I know that's a long time ago, but there are a lot of interests that started to percolate back then that, frankly, led me here to where I am today. And fundamentally, that if I think about the what drove me to explore even finance as a career, it's curiosity and creativity, and naturally having an aptitude for engineering and science. And so that really started when I was in high school. And I didn't grow up in the United States. I actually grew up in Asia, and I went to an international school, and I had the benefit of having wonderful teachers that really honed in my interest in science. And so chemistry and physics were two subjects that I loved. Still remember I did my senior project around measuring how much of activity you see from different colored lenses from a solar power perspective. And so just forward the clock and where we are today, solar power powers our homes. So it's kind of crazy to think about that when I look back. But it really started there, which is this sort of curiosity on how things work and really be driven on the sciences. And that is what really led me to exploring, engineering in college. So I did go to Duke for college. So I came to the United States for college. And what I liked about biomedical engineering is, it married the two interests that I had. One was the medical field. I had a lot of family members who are in the medical field and the caregiving way, but I wasn't necessarily interested in that. I wanted to do something that was more hands-on and really building devices or therapeutics and exploring that, as a way to solve the world's healthcare problems.
And just to be clear, you're 18 years old and you're on Duke's campus freshman year,
Yes.
and you're already this focused.
I picked biomedical engineering as my major. So I went to Pratt School of Engineering at Duke. And as far as I was concerned, I was going to go work for a Medtronic, or a Pfizer and come up with a product, right? That was what I thought was super fascinating. And as I kind of went along my sort of college journey, I had a professor at Duke, and she was on Wall Street. She did actually work at Goldman. And, also a cousin that worked on Wall Street. And that's when I really started to hear about investment banking as a real career path. And it was intriguing, to say the least, which is, the idea that the financial merits of a company really inform decision-making, and you get to be in an environment where it's fast-paced and you get to be at the center of really the critical decisions a company is making and help them through it, was really intriguing to me. And it kind of led me to my second major, which is economics. And, it was sort of a way to dabble into that. And they really pushed me to kind of look at investment banking as a potential career path after Duke. So I did what you do with investment banking. I applied. And along the way, as I was having these conversations with people and informational interviews, I got even more intrigued. Sort of forward the clock a little bit, I landed an internship at Goldman Sachs. This was back in 2007. So that's the heyday. So there's an interesting story there, right? So I interned in the heyday, and I started full time in 2008, which was the complete opposite. So starting a career at a tumultuous time, I think, has really laid the foundation of, where I have gone in terms of preparing myself for the worst, right? Because you really got to see that at that time frame. But as intense and as hard as the being at a sort of high functioning environment where, there are all these talented people, it was, by far, I like to say is 10 years at a Goldman Sachs is equivalent to a 20 plus year career elsewhere. It just gives you that breadth and depth of knowledge that you just cannot get, in my opinion, anywhere else. But as I reflect on it and look back, there's really two, I would say, defining moments, if you will, as a finance that has really crafted my leadership style as a finance leader. One is I had a client a biotech client that I was brought on as a senior member of the team at the time. And it was my first team that I was going to be leading, so in a senior leadership capacity. And this client was based in Boston, and we were being hired to help them go public, so to do an IPO. And so obviously that's a major transaction in a company's history. It's exciting for me as, newly minted vice president. I was excited by it. And, this gives you a sense of my risk tolerance, if you will. I wanted to fly out a couple of days before. The client was based in Boston, didn't want any delays. I flew out a couple of days before, was ready to go. And the day before, we were supposed to have the kickoff meeting. There was a big snowstorm that came through Boston. And my manager's flight was canceled, so he couldn't make it in person. And those were pre-pandemic where Zoom wasn't really widely adopted, avenue. And so I kind of had this moment of, okay, I guess I am leading this. And, there is no backstop. The room is going to be looking to me to have the right guidance, the right advice. So I embraced that. And so over the next sort of 3 days, we had what's called intense drafting sessions. We're helping craft the company's story, draft their IPO documents. And it was a room of the management team, of course, myself representing Goldman and other bankers and lawyers. It was about 10 or so people. And I found myself, having a view, guiding them through the story, asking the questions, and people were listening. They were paying attention, and it was a remarkable 3 days. It really taught me. Well, first of all, that is what drove me to get even more excited about biotech. And two, it really taught me that leadership doesn't mean you have to have all the answers. You have to know how to ask the right questions. You have to listen actively and really drive to decisions and have conviction in those decisions. And this client, by the way, that those 3 years turned into over 6 years of supporting them through my time at Goldman, taking them from a preclinical stage company to a commercial stage company and many transactions in between. And it really sort of fostered a valuable relationship. And so it was a icing on the cake, if you will, of being with them through it all, if you will, and really kind of solidified my interest in that industry.
At the same time, across the table from you are the C-suite executives, and you're getting a read on sort of the dynamics within their organizations, how they sort of operate, communicate between each other, and then to their banker. It encouraged you to move to their side of the table, it appears. So what is it that happens? Are you, because was there a period where you thought, I love banking and I'm going to stick with this. I could see myself here in another 10 years. And then suddenly some opportunity intrigued you, or you realized you could, there's another piece of this I'd really like to understand.
That's a great question. I always had an inkling to start something. Or to be an operator, if you will. I mean, if you go back to the being an engineer and building something, I like to build. Building is something I am excited by. Problem solving is something I'm excited by. So that was always in the back of my head. It was more of, when is the right time? And when is the right time? What is the right opportunity? Who are the right people? Is it the right time in my career to make that leap? And I really enjoyed, investment banking, and to your point of you get exposed to such a breadth of clients, and you really get to understand not only how companies make their strategic decisions, you have a part in that, right? You advise them in that, but it also gives you a view into what decisions may not work. And what are decisions they're making that you may advise them differently? It kind of gives you the roadmap, if you will, the framework of how to think about it, which I knew was going to be super valuable no matter what. And so really for me, it was, and kind of leads to sort of the Kinnate chapter, if you will, was I needed sort of all the stars to align around the people, what the company's mission was, and where I was in my career, that this is a growth and the right time to leave, to come together to really kind of give me that push out the door, if you will. And those stars did align, vis-a-vis Kinnate, and kind of, brings me to my current chapter, if you will.
When we speak with finance leaders who built their careers at Goldman Sachs, we can't resist trying to understand better that culture. You had 13 years there. It's clear you thrived in that culture. Other talented people don't always thrive in that highly competitive, pressure-driven culture. Why did you succeed in that culture?
Yeah, I think the way I would answer that question is what energized me that kept me there, is how I look at it. And what energized me, frankly, was the clients and the work I was doing. I think one of the beauties of healthcare, first of all, it's very, very easy to get energized by what the company is doing, first of all, right? The mission of these companies. And I spend a lot of time in high growth companies, biotech, life sciences tools, diagnostics, and even medtech, where you can really see what the company's trying to achieve, which is to get to a patient, right? So that in itself helps a lot, right? You know, whatever work you're putting into advising them is going towards a greater goal, right? And as I think of my transition to be an operator, I'm just getting closer to that greater goal, right? That's really how I think about it. So I would say that first and foremost. I mean, if you don't enjoy what you're doing, it's really hard to substantiate, any culture for that matter,
Right.
in my opinion. So I think that first and foremost helped. I did work with some great people there. I think, while it was an intense, competitive place, I think every part of the organization runs differently. It was a great group of people I worked with that I have a lot of respect for, and it really felt like everyone was swimming, even though there's always competition. Everyone was swimming to the greater goal of really helping the client, and I think that was really, at least for me, my experience that kind of kept me there. And I do thrive in high pressure situations. I know that about myself. And there's a tremendous amount I have learned from being, call it trying to make decisions in high pressure situations that are incredibly valuable as an operator. You also get a better threshold of what do you get stressed out about, right? There's a range that could trigger you, but if you've managed a stress level that is high, you have a less reason to get phased by every little thing. You learn how to be calm in those situations, which again is hugely valuable as an operator.
Just want to ask you to once more reflect on the people across the table that you observed closely over the years. When there was a management team there, maybe a CFO and the CEO,
and maybe the COO. What is it that distinguished the management teams that were high performing? What set them apart? What gave you a clue as to how this team's got it together?
Yeah, I think someone actually told me this, which is, the best operators haven't just sort of zoomed through their operating career. They have scars. Scars mean something because they've learned something, and they've had to navigate through challenges and problems. And it's much easier to just kind of go by and ride the wave and everything's going great. The harder part comes when you're trying to solve problems. And that to me, fundamentally, that's what it comes down to. Now, as a banker, you don't see all of that, on the other side of the table. But, a large part of being an investment banker isn't just executing on the transactions. It's supporting your client through decision making as well. And sometimes those are not easy decisions to make. And so it's really that, seeing how the team comes together and how they interact with each other to form those decisions and how they think through it, and being a partner to them. That's really where you can really, in my opinion, you can discern sort of a team that works well together versus a team that may not work as well together.
We're curious how your Kinnate chapter kicks off. We always like to know, is there a recruiter involved? Is there a relationship? Did you have an understanding of the company and its promising offerings, perhaps? I don't know, but what would you share with us?
Yeah, I was contacted by, externally to with the opportunity. I was familiar with the company. I did spend a lot of time in the general space within biotech that Kinnate operates in. I had an interest in the space. And, I think in general, therapeutics is a really getting one step closer to the patient without going through a medical career. So there you go. So just to give you a little snippet about Kinnate and kind of where we are, Kinnate was founded in 2018. So it's a fairly young company. So we've been around for about 5 years. It was founded by Steve Kaldor, who is sort of a renowned chemist here in San Diego. He unfortunately passed away. So it's a really testament to him on what we started with in terms of what we were able to build. But what's exciting about Kinnate, we're focused on oncology and really developing drugs. So all of our drugs we've invented in-house. And in 5 years, we have 2 drugs that are in humans or in clinical trials currently. So it's a remarkable progress we've made. And we're focused on developing drugs for in oncology where there currently is a target or a driver of that cancer that is validated. So it's known to drive cancer. But today's therapies don't work for that particular target, or patients are progressing on existing therapies and there's need for additional therapies to target what's called resistance. So that's our focus. And as I said, we've made tremendous progress in 5 years. And really what's allowed us to make that progress is not only an incredible team, of course, but we don't have physical labs. What we have done is we have an external ecosystem of partners that we leverage to really get scale. And so just one example of that is on the chemistry side, we have a small in-house team that's highly sophisticated and experienced. We call them drug hunters that really know how to design the chemistry of the drugs and optimize for them. But we have the flexibility and ability to leverage anywhere from, call it 15 to 75 medicinal chemists that we contract with based on the needs to scale that work. So that gives us speed, because typically it takes time to set up a lab and you have to go to hire people on the bench to optimize and develop drugs. By using this type of scalability and system, we're able to get there quickly. And frankly, also from a financial perspective, it gives us maximal flexibility as we are trying to make decisions on what makes sense to bring forward to the next phase, or, what makes sense to sort of put on the back burner because maybe, we can't get there quickly. And speed, of course, is really important for a biotech company, and getting there quickly.
This type of ecosystem that you're describing, is it uncommon? I mean, you've studied the space closely. I mean, has other biopharma firms taken a similar approach, and is it widely?
It is. Yeah, it's a great question. It's uncommon to only have that. And there are companies that sort of have a mixture of both, if you will, but it's fairly uncommon to have only that. There are more companies that are thinking that way nowadays because it is more capital efficient. But it is fairly unique, and I'd like to consider ourselves at the forefront of kind of seeing the value in setting that up early and forming those relationships with those partners to get quality work as well, as a company.
So Kinnate is public today, but can you give us maybe a short history as to how it was funded? I know you mentioned the founder earlier.
Yes, yeah. So the company it started with really Foresight, which is our lead investor, idea on a napkin, and really backing Steve Kaldor as the founder. That's really where it started. And Foresight seeded the company and took a large part of the Series A. And we had other investors come in, including OrbiMed, which is a large holder of ours, along the way. The company went from Series A, Series B, and then Series C. And the Series C was also done in 2020, right before the IPO. I mean, these were the heyday of the market, if you will. And the company was still preclinical at the time when Kinnate went public. And I think the other interesting thing, and I'll touch on this later as well, in the strategic moment, if you will, is that we have not raised any more capital than the IPO, since the IPO. And so that gives you a sense of the magnitude of capital that we were able to raise over arguably a short period of time, right? So a company founded in 2018 to today. And, that's, again, a testament to the team. It's a testament to what we're working on. But that cash is valuable, if you will, as you're thinking about developing drugs and what that entails.
Now, since you arrive in June 2021, is that right?
That's right. Yep.
Okay. Now, when you come and you begin talking to investors and you're sharing with them, certain financials and measurements and what have you, did you attempt to share something a little different, educate them a little differently? Was there something that you felt needed to be included or told differently, a measurement maybe, or just some sort of business dynamic that somehow wasn't becoming part of the story or people weren't retaining? I don't know. I'm looking for,
I would say, just to kind of level set, for a company like Kinnate, the focus of investors, given we're a biotech company and we don't have revenue and we're going to be years from, sales, if you will, the two main areas of focus are, one, cash, and what your cash and cash runway is. How long is that cash going to take you? Is it going to take you to major inflection points in the company from a clinical data perspective? And then two, it's the actual programs themselves. So what we are working on and educating them on the differentiation of our programs versus the competitive landscape. And what the commercial opportunity would be in the future for those programs, right? As they slowly approach, that stage. So that's the landscape of information that investors care about for a biotech company. So it is different than if you're a commercial stage company where more of the focus are on the pure financial metrics, if you will. And so I think when I did come in, we were 6 months from the IPO. And I'll touch on some of this as well in the strategic moment. There was a change in the market landscape that happened in those 6-month period, right? So from December 2020, when the company IPO'd, to June 2021, there was already starting to be a shift in the market dynamics and the volatility. And I found myself coming in with investors having to answer a lot of the questions that normally a company would get during the IPO process. But because of how fast companies were going public and investors are looking at so many of these companies, they're riding the wave, it was almost a moment of stop and let's think. And let's re-ask the questions and really dig in. And so it was really more about refining the story, giving them more of the, detailed positioning of the company's assets in the landscape. And also, frankly, looking at cash and kind of giving them confidence around the ample runway that the company did have at that time were really the focus areas where I was, really driven to kind of get the company towards.
Before we jump to our finance strategic moment segment, I wanted to ask you about AI. And as you, over the last year or so, as we all have, we know finance leaders have been studying some of the AI possibilities for their companies more closely, trying to understand better how it might reshape what they do a little differently. What about this company and AI? Are you already using it in some pretty impactful ways, or what is it something that lays more in the future?
Yeah, so holistically, I think AI certainly has a lot of room in healthcare more broadly, and certainly in drug development in particular, right? Whether you look at developing these drugs and using AI to identify which targets to go after, all the way to where is this drug going to work in patients, right? How do we find the right patients for a drug? And then there's this whole ecosystem of making clinical trials operate more seamlessly by using AI. I think AI is here to stay. I think we just need to find the right balance around, compliance and data privacy to ensure that it's done the right way. Where Kinnate is in that evolution is, we use a little bit of AI, if you will, in the drug development capacity in terms of target identification. We're not quite mature where AI is sort of the foundation or the bread and butter of the organization. And that's across the board, call it in R&D and also in finance. We do use systems, in finance in particular, to help gain more visibility into the financials and be more nimble and agile in forecasting. And of course, on the compliance side, for our financial statements, et cetera, we do use an ERP software, for example. But as it relates to AI, it really is, I think we're in the nascent stage, but it's certainly something, we're keeping our eye out as to where can it be leveraged the most, and again, striking that balance around
Thank
doing it the
you
right way.
for that insight there. We are up to our finance strategic moment question, and this is where we just ask you for a moment of strategic insight that you've experienced along the way as a finance leader, just given your lines of sight into the company, into the business. Might have happened when you're an investment banker. It might have happened last week. What comes to mind when we ask for a finance strategic moment?
Yeah. So, kind of piggyback on where I started with this, and I left some breadcrumbs there, about 6 months into when I started. So beginning of 2022, the market was already starting to see volatility, but it really, you turned the corner on 2022. You started to see inflationary pressures. You had Ukraine, and there were macro trends that were really informing, starting of potentially a recession. And kind of looked at that and took a step back and said, what we have today is a cash-rich company. We have a big vision to execute on these programs. We have to now look at that cash and see if we can extend that further. Because it isn't looking like the markets are going to turn around on a flip. And we want to be capital prudent and ride this out so that when it does turn around, we are ready to go, and then we can raise more capital. Because keep in mind, for a biotech company, there's always going to be need to raise capital in the future because we are burning cash up until a certain point where a drug gets approved and is commercialized. And so it's really critical to be proactive and forward thinking around decisions you make, around programs, around spend, to ensure that the cash is lasting you as long as possible to get to an inflection point. And so I kind of rallied the team, the finance team, and partnered with our R&D team to really go line by program and ask the question, do we need to make this strategic bet now? Can we wait to make it? Are there areas where we can optimize? Are there areas where we should be spending more because we think that it has a higher probability of success of getting there? And that exercise, of course, involved the partnership of the team to really get on board and understand the same thing, I was seeing or finance was seeing, which is, hey, we're in this different market backdrop now. We've got to think a little bit differently. And what we were able to achieve is really an extension of a runway, to my earlier point, that has allowed us to not raise any more capital since the IPO. And wait for the right time that it makes sense for the company to raise capital where we have that right inflection point for the programs that investors are giving us value for. But it was an exercise that really, I think, is instilled discipline in our employee base as well around how they think about financials, and the fact that you kind of need to look 6 months, a year ahead when you make decisions on financials and not be reactive to really make a difference in a strategic direction of the company.
From episode 740, this is CFO Roy Simmons of GE Lighting, a Savant company.
The pivot that we went through in 2019 in preparation to join up with Savant was to establish ourselves in I'll call it a standalone middle market finance organization, where we had to retool and redefine treasury. We had to retool and redefine controllership and tax. We needed to hire talent into the business so that we didn't have to survive with General Electric Company transition service agreements, the nemesis of many CFOs in post-divestiture worlds. And so that year that we spent prior to the actual consummation of the sale was around building that, I'll call it standalone.
We want you to think back to your early days just after you arrived here. It must have been something. If you could go back in time and give yourself a piece of advice that first 60 days, that first 90 days, after all those years in banking, you arrive on the operations side. There must have been something you wish someone had told you, or, if you could go back in time and give yourself just a little piece of advice, all of what you've experienced since then, what is it?
Yeah. I will say, I think one of the benefits of being on the banking side and having, these lovely clients that I supported for so many years is they were a wealth of information, incredibly helpful, and continue to be to this day in terms of a network of people that are have done this before, for lack of a better word, and did give me a lot of the do's and don'ts. I spent a lot of time during my garden leave picking their brain on things to watch out for, what should I be focused on, etc. But even with all of that, I think the one thing that stands out that, was an aha moment for me, and I kind of wish someone had kind of really drummed that in, was, at a firm like Goldman Sachs, a large company, if you will, the amount of effort it takes and the time it takes to invest in your people or motivate them is far less than what it is like in a smaller company like Kinnate. I think that was, for me, the one piece of thing. I knew I had to spend time there as a leader. I did so at Goldman. What I didn't realize is how much more time it meant managing people, investing in them, fostering that talent at a smaller organization where you are working with 50, 60, 100 people, but you're not 50 people in an 1,000 plus organization.
I think it's interesting. You sort of had this string of unique environments or communities that you mentioned to us.
You talked about your high school experience. You talked about Duke. You talked about Goldman, of course, and now you're in this other new environment. Is there something they had in common? They each allowed you to focus on what you wanted to do and pursue your goals. It seems like you had these unique environments that allowed you to achieve your goals.
Yeah, obviously you look in hindsight and it's easy to pull that thread through, right? At the time, you didn't seem that way. Yeah, exactly. But I've always been driven by, am I passionate about what I'm doing? It's more than sort of the job itself, if you will. And that's really the thread I can think about that continues. Do I enjoy working with these people? Am I bought into the mission? And, at Goldman's the mission of the clients and what we do for them. Here it's the mission of, basically, expanding, helping patients that are battling cancer, right? So the mission driven is certainly what drives me to that sort of true north of the goal, and sort of hoping, problem solving. I hate to kind of boil it down to that. There's something about like being able to help a company solve its problems, or a client solve his problems, or solving my own problems, that there's this excitement that comes from, satisfaction that comes from it, if you will.
We always like to ask our guests to reflect a little bit on the personal side. We're wondering if you have a personal habit, part of a daily routine that you're known for. 10 years ago, people might have said this about you. It's this, or, maybe it's a family member would point it out. She's always done it that way. Don't know. Is there something that people would point out to us? There she goes.
Yeah. I mean, I've always been a driven person. So I think that, if you ask my family members, they will certainly say that. I've always been driven. I put my mind to something, I will get it done. That's usually what they'll say. I think maybe it's the answer a little bit different. Something some people may not know about me, if you will, is it's unfortunately a hobby I don't have much time for these days, because I have two young boys. So hopefully they'll continue the trend. But I used to do a lot of debating, singing, and acting back in sort of the middle school, high school, elementary school days. I even ranked in Singapore in a Tamil, which is an Indian language singing competition and storytelling competition. So storytelling has always been something I've been excited about. So that's something people probably don't know about me, but if only I had infinite amount of hours in the day and I could still do that, but we're gonna have to leave it to the kids.
Are you then multilingual?
I do speak multiple languages. I would say over time, my aptitude in those other languages have not been what they used to be, just because I don't use them that often. But one of the benefits of living internationally is you do get exposed to multiple languages, and then of course Indian languages. I learned in school. Actually, Tamil is not my second language. Is not what my parents speak, but there are other dialects as well that we speak amongst the family. And I did pick up Indonesian language when I was in international school, and I took Spanish. But I will not converse with you in a second language, if you will, because I'm not quite there yet, unfortunately.
We always like to ask, and curious, would you have a book selection for us? Doesn't have to be a business book. It might be something that just a passion or something that interests you. Anything?
I would say I really enjoyed My Life in Full, which is Indra Nooyi's memoir. A lot of reasons why, but importantly, she is a female immigrant that has risen to leadership levels, and I can resonate with that as a female immigrant of Indian descent on so many levels. What I really loved about her memoir is that it is very honest. It doesn't sugarcoat anything. It's some real life experiences that she went through personally and professionally that, really resonate with me, and a lot to be learned for how she navigated some of those challenges to kind of get to where she is. It's not this perfect world of, life is balanced and you figure it out, but it's hard to maintain that balance, and she really points some of that out. So I thought it was super valuable.
Nice. Thank you for that. And we are up to our final question, where we're going to ask you to look forward finally. And we'd like to know what your priorities are for the coming 12 months as CFO of Kinnate.
Yeah, as a CFO, as I've touched on prior, especially in a biotech company where you are burning cash, I think it's really important as we look forward to continue to evaluate our programs and ensure that we are making the right decisions for shareholders in terms of strategically making decisions, investing in the pipeline assets that we know have the highest probability of success of getting there, and allocating our capital adequately to get to those goals. Second thing that's on my mind too is on the team dynamic and investing in our talent that are going to get us there, right? Because the team is certainly critical to get to those goals that we are planning for financial perspective.
Neha Krishnamohan, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thank you.
Hello, Thought Leader listeners. As you have perhaps already heard or even seen, we're now featuring the career lessons and moments of strategic insight shared by our CFO guests as Thought Leader videos. You can now find these videos on our blog at cfothoughtleader.com and, of course, our newsletters, but also on LinkedIn. If you haven't already, please go ahead and follow our CFO Thought Leader LinkedIn company page, and you'll be certain not to miss a single Thought Leader video debut. CFO Thought Leader, the #1 thought leadership platform exclusively for and by CFOs. As always, thank you for listening.